My in-laws uninvited me from the merger gala, claiming my state school education would embarrass their billionaire investors. They didn't know I was the anonymous architect behind the $90 million deal, or that the buyers were only coming to meet me. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The email notification on my phone pinged, a sharp, singular sound that seemed to cut through the heavy silence of the living room. I didn't need to look at it to know what it was. It was a confirmation from the caterers for the gala I had spent the last 6 months silently orchestrating from the shadows of my home office. I was sitting on the sofa, my legs tucked under me, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea. I felt physically drained, a bone-deep exhaustion that had less to do with the work I'd been doing and everything to do with the tension radiating from my husband, James, who was currently pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace. He had been home for 20 minutes and had barely looked me in the eye. He was adjusting his cuffs, smoothing his tie, checking his watch, doing everything except telling me what he clearly needed to tell me. "James," I said softly, my voice sounding raspy in the quiet room, "you're going to wear a hole in the rug, just say it." He stopped pacing but didn't turn to face me immediately. He looked at the mantelpiece, at the framed photo of his parents, Sylvia and Richard, standing proudly in front of their factory. "It's about tomorrow night," James said, his voice tight. "Mother called while I was driving home." "And," I prompted, though a cold knot was already forming in my stomach. "Is there an issue with the venue?" I double-checked the seating charts this morning. The delegation from Tokyo is set to be at the center table, right next to Richard. James finally turned. His face was pale, his expression a mixture of guilt and frustration. "No, Maya, the venue is fine. The seating chart is being rearranged." I set my tea down on the coffee table with a clatter. "Rearranged? Why? Mr. Tanaka is very particular about hierarchy. If you move him away from the CEO." "It's not about Tanaka," James interrupted, taking a step toward me but stopping short of actually comforting me. "It's about the head table, the family table." He took a deep breath, like a diver preparing to go under. "Mother and father don't think you should come." The words hung in the air, absurd and brutal. I blinked, sure I had misheard. "Excuse me, I shouldn't come to the merger celebration." James winced. "Look, it's not me, you know it's not me, but this deal? It's $90 million, Maya. It saves the company. It saves everything. And Mother is she's spiraling. She's convinced that everything has to be perfect." "And I'm the imperfection?" I asked, my voice rising. "It's the investors," James said, the words rushing out now. "The Japanese delegation. They are very traditional, very elite. Mother thinks. She thinks that because you don't have a background in finance or the right schooling." "The right schooling," I repeated, feeling the blood drain from my face. "You mean because I went to a state university and not a private prep school like you and your sister?" "She said it's a matter of pedigree," James whispered, looking down at his shoes. "She said this party is for highly educated circles. She's afraid that if you're seated there and someone asks you about your online tutoring, that it will look unprofessional, that it will make the family look common." She used the word liability, Maya. I sat there frozen. A liability. I am the one who stayed up until 4:00 a.m. for 3 weeks straight, analyzing the cultural disconnects in the initial proposal. I am the one who ghost-wrote Richard's speeches because he couldn't sound empathetic if his life depended on it. I am the one who speaks fluent Japanese, a fact Sylvia and Richard have never bothered to remember because they think I just teach English to kids on Zoom. "And what did you say?" I asked, my voice trembling. "When she called me a liability, when she said my education wasn't good enough for her party, what did you say, James?" James rubbed the back of his neck, his face pained. I told her you've been helpful, but, Maya, you have to understand the pressure Richard is under. If this deal falls through, they lose the factory. They lose the house. I couldn't fight her on this. Not tonight. I just told her I would handle it. He looked at me with pleading eyes. Please, just for one night, can you just stay home, so we don't complicate things? I looked at my husband, the man I had supported emotionally and financially for 5 years while he tried to find his footing in his father's shadow, and I felt something break. It wasn't my heart. It was my respect. They think I'm not educated enough to eat dinner, I said quietly. It's just optics, James pleaded. I looked away, staring at the dark window. The rejection didn't just hurt my heart, it insulted the very intellect that was about to save them. James left 20 minutes later. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He just gave an awkward wave from the hallway and muttered something about needing to help his mother with the final walkthrough at the venue. When the front door clicked shut, the silence of the house crashed down on me. It was oppressive. I sat there for a long time, the cold tea still sitting on the coaster, the condensation pooling at the base of the mug. My mind was racing, replaying the conversation, dissecting every word. Pedigree, common, liability. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, my movements mechanical. I felt heavy, as if gravity had doubled in the last hour. My hands were shaking slightly as I poured the tea down the sink. I needed to do something. I couldn't just sit there. I walked into my home office, the spare room, as Sylvia called it. To her, this was where I played teacher. To me, it was the command center. My desk was cluttered with notes on the Tanaka Corporation's acquisition strategy. I picked up a dossier I had bound myself. Inside were the psychological profiles of the entire Japanese executive team. I had spent months compiling this. I knew that Mr. Tanaka loved 19th century French literature. I knew his CFO was allergic to shellfish. A detail I had personally ensured was flagged to the catering staff, under James's name, of course. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Sylvia. James said he spoke to you. Thank you for being understanding, Maya. It's a very technical crowd tonight, lots of Wharton and Harvard alumni. You would have been bored to tears hearing them talk about global economics. We'll bring you a plate of dessert on Sunday. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with angry tears. Bored to tears. She truly believed it. She truly believed that I was simple, that I was just the nice girl from the public school who baked cookies and helped kids with their ABCs. She had no idea that my online tutoring was a cover for my work as a crisis negotiator and cultural strategist for one of the top consulting firms in the country. She had no idea that the consultant Richard had been emailing for months, the one they knew only as MV Strategy, was me, Maya Vance. I sat down in my office chair, the leather creaking beneath me. I opened my laptop and saw the email thread with Mr. Tanaka's assistant. Subject: Final itinerary for signing ceremony. From Hiroshi Sato. To MV Strategy. Dear M, Mr. Tanaka is eager to finally meet you in person at the gala tomorrow. He has mentioned several times that he will not sign the final papers until he has shaken the hand of the person who understands his vision so clearly. Please confirm you will be seated at the main table. I read the email 3 times. Sylvia and Richard thought they were buying prestige. They thought the Tanaka deal was happening because of their legacy, their factory's reputation, and their pedigree. They thought they were the stars of the show. I closed the laptop slowly, the soft click echoing in the empty room. My chest ached with the injustice of it. I had saved them. I had saved them from bankruptcy, from humiliation, from their own incompetence. And their thank you was to hide me away like a dirty secret. But as I looked at the dark screen of my computer, the tears stopped. A cold, hard clarity replaced the sadness. Sylvia had made a calculation. She had weighed my value against her vanity and decided I came up short. She thought she was protecting the deal by keeping the uneducated wife away. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Mr. Tanaka wasn't coming to see Richard's factory. He wasn't coming to admire Sylvia's dress. He was coming to meet the mind behind the merger. And if that mind wasn't there. I didn't reply to Sylvia's text. I didn't call James. I just sat in the dark office, watching the blinking cursor on my screen, realizing that for the first time in my marriage, I held all the cards. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand the history. You have to understand that I didn't just marry James. I married into a fortress of expectation that I was never intended to breach. I met James 5 years ago. He was sweet, a little lost, and terrified of his father. Richard Vance is a man who takes up all the oxygen in a room. He built Vance Manufacturing into a regional powerhouse in the 80s and has been coasting on that success ever since, refusing to modernize, refusing to pivot. When I met James, the company was already bleeding money. James was trying to launch a digital marketing division to save it, but he had no idea what he was doing. I did. I had just finished my Master's in International Relations and was working my way up in corporate strategy. I spent our first year of dating rewriting his proposals on weekends. I taught him how to read a P&L statement properly, something his expensive business degree apparently hadn't covered. I guided him through his first major contract negotiation. When we got married, Sylvia cried, not tears of joy. She cried because my parents were high school teachers in Ohio, and we didn't have a summer home. She's sweet, I heard her tell a cousin at the wedding reception, not bothering to lower her voice. But she's not. Of our world, is she? I just hope she doesn't hold James back. That was the narrative, Maya the anchor, Maya the limitation. I tried so hard to win them over. I learned about wine. I learned about golf. I dressed the way Sylvia wanted me to dress, but it was never enough. Then came the crisis. 6 months ago, Vance Manufacturing lost its biggest contract. They were facing liquidation. Richard was in denial, buying new cars while the ship sank. Sylvia was planning vacations they couldn't afford. James came to me, weeping at the kitchen table. "We're going to lose everything," he had sobbed. "My inheritance, the house, my parents' legacy, it's all gone." That was when I stepped in. I used my contacts. I reached out to a connection in Tokyo who knew the Tanaka Corporation was looking to expand into American manufacturing. I set up the initial bridge. I created the MV strategy persona to keep my involvement hidden, knowing Richard's ego would never allow him to take advice from his daughter-in-law. I fed them the lines, I structured the deal, I saved them. And now, here we were. I thought about the antagonists of my life as I sat there. Sylvia, a woman who wore Chanel suits like armor. She had never worked a day in her life, yet she spoke about work ethic constantly. Her primary occupation was judgment. She had a way of looking at you, scanning your shoes, your bag, your hair, that made you feel like you were being appraised at a discount pawn shop. And Richard, a man who believed his own hype. He was loud, brash, and dismissive of anything he considered soft skills. He called my job playing on the computer. He once asked me at Christmas dinner, "So, Maya, do you actually make money, or does James just give you an allowance to pretend?" I remembered that dinner vividly. It was last year. We were sitting at their mahogany dining table under a chandelier that cost more than my parents' car. "I do all right, Richard," I had said, smiling tightly. "Well, it's good you have a hobby," Sylvia had chimed in, pouring more wine. "It keeps you busy while James is doing the real work." James had said nothing. He had just eaten his steak, keeping his head down, just like he did tonight. That was the real betrayal. It wasn't just that they were snobs. It was that they were snobs who were currently spending the money I had secured for them while spitting on the hand that fed them. They were polished, yes. They were charming to outsiders. Richard could slap a back and tell a joke. Sylvia could host a tea party with impeccable grace. But beneath the veneer of old money and pedigree, they were hollow. They were grifters in Gucci, surviving on the momentum of the past, terrified of the future, and utterly dependent on the one person they refused to respect. I looked at the clock. 9:00 p.m. The gala was tomorrow night. I imagined Sylvia right now, walking through the ballroom, instructing the florists to move the lilies 3 inches to the left, feeling powerful. I imagined Richard practicing his toast, ready to take credit for the brilliant strategy that saved the company. They had no idea that the strategy was sitting in her pajamas, drinking tea, and holding the nuclear launch codes to their entire existence. They wanted me to stay home. Fine, I would stay home. But I wasn't going to be silent. The morning of the gala arrived with a deceptive calm. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening rain, and the house was quiet. James had slept in the guest room, cowardice disguised as consideration, so I made my coffee alone. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. The sadness from the night before had calcified into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just a rejected daughter-in-law, I was a professional who had been erased. And in my line of work, erasure is a tactical error. I walked into my office, shutting the door firmly behind me. It was time to audit the narrative. I logged into the secure server I had set up for the project. Technically, I was still an administrator. Richard and Sylvia were so technologically illiterate they wouldn't know how to revoke my access even if they knew I had it. They assumed the cloud was S. Thing that happened in the sky. I began to sift through the correspondence folders, looking for the specific communications between Richard's office and the Tanaka legal team regarding the final protocols. I found it, a document titled Principal Advisor Biography and Attestation. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened the PDF. This was a standard document in high-level Japanese corporate mergers, a know-your-partner formality where the lead strategists are identified to ensure honor and continuity. There, on page 2, under the heading Lead Strategist/MV Strategy Identity, was a photograph. It wasn't me. It was Richard. I stared at the screen, my mouth going dry. Beneath his photo, a biography claimed that he was the sole architect of the Cultural Bridge strategy. It claimed he was the one who had spent 3 years living in Kyoto, a lie, he went there once on a cruise. It claimed he was fluent in business Japanese, a lie, he knew how to say sushi and Toyota. You absolute fool, I whispered to the empty room. This wasn't just vanity. This was fraud, material misrepresentation. If Mr. Tanaka found out that the man he was signing a $90 million check to had lied about his credentials in the due diligence filings, the deal wouldn't just be canceled. Vance Manufacturing would be blacklisted. They could be sued for bad faith negotiation. I kept digging. I needed more. I needed to know how deep the rot went. I found an email thread from last week between Sylvia and the event planner. Subject, seating chart adjustments. From Sylvia Vance. To Elite Events. Regarding the inquiry from Mr. Sato about the translator, Maya, please inform his team that she is merely a junior assistant who handled some scheduling. She is not part of the executive team and will not be attending. We have hired a professional interpreter for the evening to ensure no embarrassment. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking. Junior assistant. They hadn't just uninvited me. They had actively demoted me in the eyes of the buyer to cover their tracks. They were terrified that if I spoke to Tanaka, he would realize Richard was a fraud. I wasn't dealing with snobs. I was dealing with desperate, dangerous liars. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. Sarah, I said when the voice answered. Maya, is everything okay? Sarah was a forensic accountant and a shark of a contract lawyer who had been my mentor at my old firm. I need you to look at a standard, key man clause in an international acquisition contract, I said, my voice steady. Hypothetically, if the key man listed in the biography turns out to be a fabrication, does the buyer have the right to immediate termination with penalty? Hypothetically, Sarah laughed, a dry, sharp sound. If it's a Japanese conglomerate, they don't just terminate Maya, they scorch the earth. It's an honor violation. Why? I think my in-laws just bet the family farm on a lie, I said. And I think I'm the only one who has the receipt. Do you want to save them or bury them? She asked. I looked at the picture of Richard on my screen, smiling his smug, unearned smile. I haven't decided yet, I said, but I'm going to print everything. At 4:00 p.m., James came home to change. I was waiting for him in the bedroom. I had laid out his tuxedo on the bed, the black velvet one Sylvia insisted he wear to look regal. It looked like a costume. He walked in, looking harassed and sweaty. When he saw me sitting in the armchair by the window, he flinched. Maya, he said, breathless, I didn't think you'd be in here. Look, I don't have time for a fight. Mother is already texting me every 5 minutes asking if I have the cufflinks. I'm not here to fight, James, I said calmly. I didn't stand up. I'm here to save you from federal prison. James froze halfway to the closet. He turned slowly, a nervous laugh bubbling up in his throat. What are you talking about? I held up the file folder I had prepared. I saw the due diligence papers, James, the ones your father signed, the ones where he claims to be MV Strategy. James's face went from flush to ash gray in seconds. He sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, right next to the tuxedo. You saw that. Did you know? I asked. He looked down at his hands. He said it was just simplified. He said the investors want to see strength at the top. He said it didn't matter who actually did the work as long as the work was good. It matters to the SEC, I said, my voice cutting like a razor. And it matters to Mr. Tanaka. You know how much he values integrity. Richard lied on a legal disclosure. It's just paper, James snapped, his fear turning into defensive anger. Why do you have to make everything so dramatic? We just need to get through tonight. Once the papers are signed, the money is wired. Then it doesn't matter. It matters, I said, standing up now. Because Tanaka asked for me, specifically, and your mother told his team I was a junior assistant who wasn't educated enough to attend. James winced. She was just protecting the brand. She was protecting the lie? I shouted, finally losing my cool. Don't you see? They uninvited me because they are terrified I'll accidentally reveal that your father is a fraud. They aren't ashamed of my pedigree, James. They are ashamed of their own incompetence. James stood up, his hands shaking. Stop it, just stop it. You're jealous. You're jealous because for once my family is winning and you're not the center of attention. I stared at him, the man I loved, the man I had protected. He was so deep in their web he couldn't even see the strings anymore. Call your mother, I said, put her on speaker. No. Call her, James, or I email this file to Mr. Sato right now. He stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. He pulled out his phone and dialed. James, darling, tell me you're leaving, Sylvia's voice chirped through the speaker, tinny and manic. The florists used the wrong shade of cream, and I am about to scream. Mother, James said, his voice cracking. Maya knows about the biography, the MV Strategy thing. Silence, a long, cold silence. Then Sylvia's voice returned, dropping an octave. And she says it's fraud, James stammered. She says if Tanaka finds out. She is hysterical, Sylvia cut in, her tone dripping with venom. This is exactly why she couldn't come. She doesn't understand high-level business. Everyone embellishes, James. It's called marketing. Tell her to take a Xanax and go to bed. And James, if you let her ruin this night, if you let that, Tudor cost us this legacy, I will never forgive you. Do not let her leave that house. The line clicked dead. James looked at me. He looked at the phone. Then he looked at the tuxedo. I have to go, he whispered. I have to go, Maya. Please just don't do anything crazy. He grabbed the suit and ran to the bathroom. 10 minutes later, he was gone. He didn't look back. I stood in the bedroom, listening to the roar of his car engine fading down the driveway. Sylvia had called my bluff. She thought I was too weak, too in love, or too common to understand the power I held. She thought she had won. I walked to the closet and pushed aside my everyday clothes. In the back, covered in plastic, was a dress I had bought 3 years ago for a charity ball we never attended. It was a deep, midnight blue silk, structured and sharp. Elegant, dangerous. I wasn't going to the party to eat dinner. I wasn't going to the party to socialize. I was going to the party to testify. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel was a fortress of light and sound. I wasn't there yet, but I could see it. I had the live stream pulled up on my phone as I drove. Vance Manufacturing had paid a small fortune to stream the event for their international satellite offices. The camera panned across the room, showing crystal chandeliers, towering floral arrangements of white lilies, the wrong shade of cream, apparently, and a sea of tuxedos and gowns. I saw Richard. He was holding court near the bar, laughing too loudly, his face flushed. I saw Sylvia. She was gliding between tables, touching arms, flashing her practiced smile, looking every inch the matriarch. And then I saw the table of honor. Mr. Tanaka sat in the center. He was an elderly man with a face carved from stone. He wasn't smiling. He was looking at his watch. Next to him sat Mr. Sato, his assistant, who was frantically typing on a tablet. There was an empty chair next to Sato. I knew that chair. That was where the interpreter was supposed to sit. The professional Sylvia had hired to replace me. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, international code. I answered it through the car's Bluetooth. "This is Maya." "Mrs. Vance," the voice was accented, polite but strained. "This is Hiroshi Sato. We are confused." "Mr. Sato," I said, keeping my eyes on the wet road. "I apologize for the confusion." "We are at the gala," Sato said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We were told you were unable to attend due to illness, but the interpreter they provided, he does not know the deal. He does not know the terms. Mr. Tanaka is asking for MV strategy. He says he will not toast with strangers." "Illness?" I let out a short, harsh laugh. "Is that what they said?" "Mrs. Vance, Mr. Tanaka is very unhappy. He feels disrespected. Richard-san is telling stories about Kyoto that make no sense. Mr. Tanaka is preparing to leave." "Tell him to wait," I said. "I'm 5 minutes away." "But your illness." "I'm not sick, Mr. Sato. I've just been redacted. I'm coming to correct the record." I hung up and pressed the accelerator. When I pulled up to the valet, the hotel was glowing like a beacon. I tossed the keys to the stunned valet. ND marched through the revolving doors. The lobby was quiet, the noise of the party muffled behind the massive double doors of the ballroom. I checked my reflection in a mirror. The midnight blue dress fit perfectly. My hair was pulled back in a severe, sleek bun. I wore no jewelry except my wedding band. I didn't need decoration. I needed armor. I walked toward the ballroom. 2 large security guards stood at the entrance, holding clipboards. Sylvia's Praetorian Guard. One of them stepped forward, a beefy hand raised. "Ma'am, this is a private event, guest list only." "My name is Maya Vance," I said, my voice projecting clearly. "I am the wife of the heir, and I am the lead consultant for the acquisition." The guard looked down at his list. He frowned. "I have a specific note here, Mrs. Vance. Strictly no admittance for Maya Vance. Instructions from Mrs. Sylvia Vance." Of course, she had put me on the blacklist of my own family's party. "Check the VIP list," I said, bluffing. "Check the Tanaka delegation list." "Ma'am, please leave or I will have to escort you out." I was about to cause a scene. I was ready to scream if I had to, when the ballroom doors swung open. James stumbled out, looking pale and terrified. He saw me and stopped dead. "Maya," he breathed, "what are you doing here? Mother will kill you." "Your deal is dying, James," I said, stepping past the guard who hesitated at James's presence. "Sato called me. Tanaka is walking out." James looked like he was going to vomit. It's a disaster. The interpreter doesn't understand the technical terms. Dad tried to make a joke about samurais and it didn't land. Tanaka hasn't said a word in 20 minutes. Get me in there, I commanded. I can't, James whispered frantically. Mother is right inside the door. She's watching the entrance like a hawk. James, I grabbed his lapels, pulling him close. Do you want to be poor? Do you want to be a laughingstock? Because that is what happens in 10 minutes unless I walk through those doors. He looked at me, searching for the weakness he was used to. He didn't find it. Okay, he whispered. Okay. He turned to the guard. She's with me, let her in. The guard stepped aside. We walked into the anteroom, a small plush hallway that separated the lobby from the main ballroom. And there she was. Sylvia was adjusting her diamond earring in a large gilded mirror. She saw us in the reflection. She spun around, her face twisting into a mask of pure fury. What is she doing here? Sylvia hissed, marching toward us, her silk gown rustling. I told you, James. I told you to keep her away. Mother, the deal is failing, James tried to say, but she cut him off. You look ridiculous, Sylvia spat at me, raking her eyes over my dress. You think you can just waltz in here and play dress-up? You are embarrassing us. Get out, before I have security drag you out. I'm not leaving, Sylvia, I said, my voice calm, contrasting her shrillness. You have no business here, she shrieked, not caring who heard. You are an uneducated little girl from Ohio. You don't belong at this table. You are nothing but a placeholder until James finds someone with class. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. It wasn't the full file. It was just one email. The one where she called me a liability and instructed the staff to lie about my employment. I'm the placeholder, I asked, stepping closer to her. I am MV Strategy, Sylvia. I am the reason there is a table. Lies, she scoffed. Richard wrote that strategy. Richard can't even spell strategy, I said. And right now, Mr. Tanaka knows it. He knows he's been lied to. He's waiting for me. He doesn't even know who you are, Sylvia yelled. Doesn't he? I smiled, a cold, dangerous smile. Then, why did his assistant just text me the gate code to the VIP entrance? Sylvia froze. Her eyes darted from me to James. Get out of my way, Sylvia, I said softly. Or I walk in there and tell the entire room exactly whose pedigree saved this company. She didn't move. She just stared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. If you go in there, she whispered, you are no longer part of this family. Honey, I said, brushing past her toward the double doors. I resigned from this family 3 chapters ago. I pushed the doors open. The light of the ballroom hit me. The murmur of the crowd died down. And I stepped into the arena. The distance from the double doors to the head table was perhaps 50 yards, but it felt like crossing a desert. The silence in the ballroom wasn't absolute. It was a living, breathing thing, punctuated by the nervous clinking of silverware and the rustle of expensive fabric. Every eye turned. I could feel them, the local elite, the bankers who held the Vance's mortgages, the rivals who were praying for this merger to fail, and the Vances themselves. I didn't look at the crowd. I locked my eyes on one person, Kenji Tanaka. He was sitting stiffly, his hands resting on the table, looking at Richard with an expression of polite bewilderment. Beside him, the hired interpreter was sweating, frantically flipping through a dictionary, clearly out of his depth. Richard saw me first. He was mid-gesture, holding a wine glass when he froze. His face, already flushed from alcohol and stress, drained of color. He stood up so abruptly his chair screeched against the parquet floor, a sound that echoed like a gunshot. Maya, he hissed, his voice carrying in the quiet room. What are you doing? I didn't stop walking. My heels clicked rhythmically on the floor. Click, 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 the sound of a clock counting down. Sylvia was right behind me, breathless, her hand reaching out to grab my arm, but stopping short as the eyes of the room landed on us. She couldn't make a scene. Not here, not now. She was trapped by her own obsession with optics. I reached the head table. Good evening, Richard, I said, my voice calm, projecting just enough for the table to hear. I believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding the seating arrangements. Richard's eyes darted to the security guards near the wall, then back to me. He forced a smile, a rictus of terror. Maya, please, this isn't the time. You're not well. You should be at home resting. He turned to Mr. Tanaka, laughing nervously. My daughter-in-law, a lovely girl, but she gets confused, very simple, doesn't understand business protocols. The interpreter leaned in to translate, but before he could speak, I turned to Mr. Tanaka. I didn't bow, I didn't smile. I looked him dead in the eye. Tanaka-san, I said, the Japanese rolling off my tongue, crisp and formal. I apologize for the delay. It seems there was a logistical error regarding the attendance of the lead strategist. The silence in the room deepened. It became heavy, suffocating. Mr. Tanaka's eyes widened. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. He looked at the midnight blue dress. He looked at my hands, empty of any drink or distraction. You speak, Tanaka asked in Japanese, his voice low and raspy. I do more than speak, I replied, still in Japanese. I listen, and I write. I believe you received my analysis on the cultural integration of the Kyoto branch last month, the one where I suggested the revised pension plan to honor your senior staff. Tanaka stood up, slowly, reverently. You are MV Strategy, he asked. No, Sylvia shrieked. She couldn't help herself. The facade cracked. She pushed past James, marching up to the table, her face twisted in a snarl. She is a liar, she is a tutor, she teaches children on the internet. She turned to the room, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. I am so sorry, everyone. This is my son's wife. She has no background in finance. She has no pedigree. She attended a state university. She is not educated enough to be part of this conversation. The room gasped. It was a raw, ugly thing to say in polite society. Even the bankers looked down at their plates. But I didn't look down. I looked at Tanaka. He was staring at Sylvia with an expression of utter coldness. I turned to Sylvia. Pedigree, I said, switching back to English so everyone could hear. You keep using that word, Sylvia. You think it means bloodlines and prep schools. But in this room, tonight, pedigree is about competence. And right now, you are the most uneducated person at this table. How dare you, Richard sputtered, stepping forward, his fists clenched. Security, get her out of here, now. 2 guards started to move toward us. Wait. The voice came from behind me. It was James. He walked past his mother. He walked past his father. He stood next to me. He was shaking, vibrating with fear, but his chin was up. If she leaves, James said, his voice cracking and then strengthening, I leave. And if I leave, I take the digital keys to the server with me. James, Sylvia gasped, clutching her pearls. You are choosing her over your legacy. She is the legacy, Mother, James said. He looked at me, and for the first time in 5 years, I saw the man I had fallen in love with. She's the only one of us who actually did the work. Mr. Tanaka raised a hand. The guards froze. He looked at Richard. Vance-san, he said in heavily accented English. You told me you wrote the strategy. You told me you lived in Kyoto. Richard swallowed hard. Sweat was dripping down his temple. Well, as CEO, I oversee all strategy. It is a collective effort. I merely streamline the biography for the sake of clarity. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the folded paper, the attestation Richard had signed. This is a legal document, Mr. Tanaka, I said, handing it to him. It states that Richard Vance is the sole author of the integration plan. It is a lie. It is fraud. And if you sign the deal, based on this document, your board will remove you for negligence. Tanaka took the paper. He put on his glasses. He read it. Then he looked at Richard. The look wasn't anger. It was disgust. It was the look one gives to a cockroach found in a fine meal. You have no honor, Tanaka said softly. He tore the paper in half, then in quarters. He let the pieces flutter down onto the untouched appetizer plates. The deal is terminated, Tanaka announced, effective immediately. No, Richard lunged forward, grabbing Tanaka's sleeve. You can't, we have a verbal agreement. The bank. The loans come due on Monday. You can't do this. Tanaka pulled his arm away as if he had been burned. You insulted the architect, he said, pointing at me. You insulted her education, you insulted her dignity, and you lied to my face. There is no deal. He turned to me, he bowed, deeply, a full 90-degree bow of respect. I am sorry, Vance-san, he said to me. It seems I came to the wrong party. He signaled to his team, let's go. The Japanese delegation stood up in unison. They marched out of the ballroom, a phalanx of black suits moving through the stunned silence. I stood there, watching them go. Richard collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Sylvia was staring at the wall, catatonic. The room erupted into whispers, the sound of a dynasty crumbling in real time. I looked at James. He took my hand. His palm was sweaty, but his grip was tight. Let's go home, I said. And we walked out, leaving the empty table, the ruined gala, and the pedigree of the Vance family behind us. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely public. By Monday morning, the news of the failed merger had hit the business section of the local paper. By Tuesday, the bank had called in the bridge loan that Richard had taken out to pay for the gala and the rebranding of the company. By Wednesday, the for sale sign was up in front of the Vance estate. I didn't see it happen. I heard about it from James, who spent those first few days on the phone, mediating between his parents and the bankruptcy lawyers. He came home every evening looking 5 years older, but lighter. He had resigned from Vance Manufacturing the morning after the gala. He walked into his father's office, where Richard was frantically trying to liquidate assets, and handed over his keys. He told them he was done being their shield. He told them he was done being their son first and my husband second. It was a hard week. We sat on our patio, drinking cheap wine, watching the sunset. They're going to lose the house, James said quietly on Friday night. And the cars, even the club memberships. Sylvia she's not handling it well. She blames you, of course. Of course, I said, swirling my glass. It's easier than blaming the mirror. I'm sorry, James said. He turned to me, his eyes wet. I'm so sorry, Maya, for everything, for the last 5 years, for making you feel like you had to audition for my love, for letting them treat you like hired help. I looked at him, I saw the regret, I saw the shame, but I also saw the break. He had finally severed the cord. He had stood next to me in the fire. I don't need an apology, James, I said, reaching out to touch his hand. I just need a partner. Are you him? I am, he said. I swear I am, even if we have nothing. I'll get a job. I'll work at a coffee shop if I have to, but I'm not going back to them. I smiled. We won't need the coffee shop. I reached under the patio table and pulled out a thick envelope. It had arrived via courier that afternoon. What is that? James asked. It's from Mr. Tanaka, I said. I opened the envelope. Inside was a contract, not for Vance Manufacturing, for me. Consulting agreement, principal advisor for North American expansion. Retainer, $250,000 per annum. Signing bonus, $50,000. He wants me to build his new team, I said, reading the terms. He wants me to find a new manufacturing partner, a partner with integrity. James stared at the paper. Maya, this is. It's my pedigree, I said softly. But there was another letter in the envelope. A handwritten note on thick, cream-colored stationery. Dear Maya-san, business is about people. I cannot buy a company from men who do not respect the source of their own wisdom. However, I still need a factory. I understand your husband has a background in digital integration and operations. If he is interested, I would like to interview him for the position of operations manager at the new facility we intend to acquire in Ohio. He showed great honor at the gala. Honor is a rare currency. Sincerely, Kei Tanaka. I handed the note to James. He read it, his hands trembling. He wants to hire me, James whispered, After everything my father did. He wants to hire the man who stood up to his father, I corrected him. He wants to hire the man who chose the truth over the money. James looked at me. And then he started to cry. Not the panicked sobbing of a boy in trouble, but the relief of a man who has been given a second chance. We didn't save the Vance family legacy. That legacy was built on sand and arrogance, and the tide had finally come in. Richard and Sylvia moved into a 2-bedroom condo in Florida, bitter and confused, telling anyone who would listen that they were victims of a corporate conspiracy. We don't talk much. But we saved us. A month later, I walked into the new Tanaka offices in downtown. I had my own office. My name was on the door, Maya Vance, Senior Strategic Director. I sat down at my desk. I looked at the view of the city skyline. My phone buzzed. It was a text from James. "Good luck on your first day, boss. I made you a sandwich. It's in your bag. Love you." I smiled. I opened my bag and took out the sandwich. It was wrapped in foil, with a little sticky note on it that said, "To the smartest woman I know." I took a bite. It tasted like victory. It tasted like I was finally exactly where I belonged.